De kaliforniska bilköparna kan välja mellan ett 40-tal olika modeller av laddbara bilar. Däremot finns det fortfarande bara 3 vätgasbilar att välja mellan. Frågan är varför delstaten Kalifornien satsar på en teknik som uppenbarligen ligger efter.
This is a conceptual graph of mapping complexity and the number of vehicles. If you're launching a plug-in electric vehicle market, you can launch the market kind of one garage at a time with some public charging. And as you go through time, the complexity starts to go up because you're starting to reach into multifamily housing. You're adding more transformers into increasingly hardening the grid as you go through time. On the other side, you have hydrogen, which very few vehicles it's complex because there's a lot of money involved and a lot of uncertainty in terms of launching a station with very few vehicles. But as the opposite trend, as you go through time, hydrogen becomes less and less complex because the number of vehicles start to support those stations and the economics start to really work. And so for us, this is one of the key arguments in favor of having both technologies. So we really want to drive the innovation on the hydrogen side, which will bring the cost down of hydrogen, supporting the market, and then also make sure that we're kind of maximizing the near-term part of the advantages of the plug-in electric vehicle and try to decrease the complexity through time there.
So is there a number of vehicles there on the x-axis?
You could look at in a region or at the state or at the country level. So it kind of all depends. But if Shell Hydrogen had done a bunch of analysis, for example, and about 70,000 vehicles in a region, they thought the price of hydrogen would be competitive with gasoline. In the hundreds of thousands of vehicles on the hydrogen side, it starts to look really attractive from an economic model.
So what we'll be doing here is producing 100% renewable hydrogen, electricity, and heat. So that's the key word, trigen, using this high temperature fuel cell from renewable biogas. So what we'll have is biogas sources throughout the entire state will then be injected into the natural gas pipeline, and then we will pull out that same amount of biogas, but technically it is the natural gas pipeline here in Long Beach. So you see that full life cycle of into the pipeline, out of the pipeline, but it is a renewable feedstock from that perspective. So really the key market for our hydrogen here is for fuel cell vehicles. I think the first one is obviously going to be our Mirai product. So our current light duty products need fuel when they come here off the boat. But it's also really the reason why we have a scale of 1.2 tons is so we can fuel our growing market for trucks as well.
Well, I love it. I drove cross country for 35 years. And we recently, last year, we had a drag race with a Cummins with the Kenworth, exactly like ours. We have the hydrogen, and when the gun goes off, we were looking in the mirror to see where he was. And if you go to a Toyota hydrogen truck, you'll see the drag race. We were 100 yards ahead of the truck, pulling 31,000 pounds, both of it at the same time. This is the compressor right here. And all the components that down here, but this is without pulling anything. Actually, we can make the rear tandems jump off the ground. It has a great deal of torque.
So the compressors, they're sucking air into the engine?
Yes, just like the Mirai car, the same thing. It has the mechanisms that actually makes this car move or this truck move.
Sounds like a hairdryer.
Right, very quiet. The only thing you hear actually is the compressor. You just touch it and it wants to go.
There is a network of fueling stations here in California. How about other states or other parts of the world?
So you're right, here in California it is the largest global market for the vehicles. We now have almost 5,000 Mirai specifically and over 6,000 total, and that's supported by about 40 stations today. And the California Fuel Cell Partnership showing that you could have maybe 1,000 stations supporting about 1 million vehicles by 2030 as kind of that stretch goal. But obviously, how do you leverage that and build to new markets, at least in North America? And so right now as Toyota, we've actually partnered with Air Liquide to start that in the Northeast states. So you'll start to see, hopefully in the next couple of years, a launch there as well, and you can naturally see how you need to bridge the gap up the West Coast. So certainly looking at very environmentally friendly, conscious states like Oregon, Washington as well, certainly makes sense to start expanding to kind of connect that hydrogen highway from California and up the coast as well.
En annan del av transportsektorn som satsar på vätgas är bussbolagen. 25% av bussar i Kalifornien färdas mer än 200 kilometer om dagen, vilket innebär att batteritekniken som finns idag helt enkelt inte räcker till.
We've been operating fuel cell buses and testing hydrogen here at Sunline since 2000. So it's over 18 years that we've been doing this.
The big question is why?
Why? Because our board is mandated that we do alternative fuel vehicles.
But why hydrogen? Most of other bus companies go with battery electric vehicles.
Well, one thing is the range. We need more range. We're not just an urban city. We have 9 cities in the county that we serve, over almost 1,200 square miles that we serve. So a lot of our routes are longer routes, and we need to be able to have the range that the hydrogen fuel electric buses do. Battery electric buses gives you between 150 and 175 mile range, and the fuel cell buses gives us between 250 and 300 mile range, similar to our conventional CNG buses. This unit, when it's operating at its full potential, that includes the compression, will utilize about 1 megawatt of power for a day of 900 kilograms. So
it looks potentially viable for long-term energy storage, as well as renewable energy storage that is infinitely storable and instantly usable.
How is it to work with hydrogen as an electrician?
I've had to really push my knowledge in, especially in controls, but also in electrical. Really because I wasn't familiar with rectifiers at all. But on the last unit, I had to program a rectifier and actually write a PID loop to maintain a certain amperage that the electrolyzer was running at. And the new unit, we will have to ramp down the rectifier, and we'll probably have to correct some harmonic distortion issues. Yeah.
So there's a lot to learn.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
What is the aim of the hydrogen solution here at Stonehenge Microgrid?
Largely, it's to show the commercial feasibility of it in the future. The owner of this project, Mac McQuown, has a saying, and that's that marginal cost is the only thing that matters. So we're fortunate in this position where we can almost disregard the upfront cost of purchasing a hydrogen electrolyzer and just focus on the marginal cost of production, which is the electricity that goes into it. And if we're using solar electricity, that can be considered free, again, once those panels are already purchased, and the cost of water, which in California is currently quite low for residential properties.
What's the value of producing your own hydrogen?
It's energy independence and resilience, and it's also another form of storage. Different than battery storage technologies, hydrogen can be produced in the summer and stored until the winter. You can't do that with any other battery chemistry because it has self-discharge. It's also flexibility of use. We fill our own vehicles on site with it. We have 3 hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. We also have stationary fuel cells that can produce up to 26.2 kilowatts of power for the site. And then we're also able to sell it on the market if we can find customers, and we're in discussions with a few to do that, possibly selling it by the trailer load to telecommunications companies who use fuel cells as backup power for the cell phone towers. And then we're also starting to just think about exploring possible combustion of hydrogen, because you can combust it similarly to you would natural gas, but the only main byproduct of it is water instead of CO2.
Is there going to be a shortage of hydrogen in California, you think?
There is a major shortage of hydrogen right now. There are 39 operating retail hydrogen fuel filling stations for vehicles, and they've been having fairly major issues with running out of fuel, and it's been stressing the infrastructure even more, and it's making it hard for drivers to be able to trust that fueling infrastructure. There are currently 3 major hydrogen production facilities in development in Southern California right now, because Southern California has the highest density of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles.
Could hydrogen be a way to sell power in a different way than producing power for the grid?
It could be. The Balancing Authority, which in California is the California Independent System Operator, or CAL-ISO, is responsible for ensuring that generation and consumption always equal each other. And in sunny California, where there's lots of solar power in the summer, that can be quite difficult, and we have to curtail solar production where we're shutting down solar while still using fossil fuels such as natural gas to produce electricity. And that's because we cannot shut down these baseline natural gas power plants in the same way. So if we could instead use that solar production, which is currently being shut down and completely wasted and non-utilized, to instead produce hydrogen, we could then turn that hydrogen back into electricity at a later time. So the flexibility of hydrogen generation through electrolysis could be a huge aid to load balancing in the future once technology costs come down.
How is it to work with hydrogen as an energy storage compared to batteries?
I definitely feel it's safer. There's definitely barriers to entry, but like I've had fires with hydrogen, I've had leaks with hydrogen, I've never been scared of it or anything like that. Batteries, it's, you're told if you have a lithium cobalt that catches fire, you can throw that thing in the ocean and it'll go out once it's, eaten itself up, but that's it. So it's definitely a worrisome bit with especially with the lithium cobalt batteries.
You said that you had fire with hydrogen. How is that?
What happened was during the purification process, it passes over palladium catalyst, which recombines the oxygen and the hydrogen, but also generates a ton of heat. And so what actually happened was a fitting got loose and it got too hot and there was a bit of flame coming out of it, but it wasn't anything major, and I just shut the system down and fixed it. So, and we've had leaks of it before, and it's at the purity we're at, it's a real mild animal. It's nothing explosive. It's not Brown's gas or anything like that. So.